Hello and welcome to World Insight with me, Tian Wei, coming to you live from Beijing on CGTN. Coming up on today's program, the DPRK scores big at the PyeongChang Olympics, not with medal but a diplomatic gold with the South Korean leader's Pyongyang visit, at least the possible visit. Was the U.S. powerless in stopping the DPRK's charm offensive? And I picked the brains of author Feng Tang. What makes him tick and what ticks him off? And why are his books such a big hit with the Chinese urbanites? Let's begin our program today in Pyeongchang, where the Winter Olympics is underway. One of the biggest and most talked about stories of the Games is undoubtedly that of the unified Korean women's hockey team. Players from Seoul and Pyongyang came together in one squad for the first time ever. It signals an easing of tensions of the source between the DPRK and South Korea. The game was played hours after Kim Jong-un invited South Korean President Moon Jae-in to visit the DPRK capital. The invitation came during a historic meeting between Moon, the sister of DPRK leader.
Speculation has been mounting for days over the contents of a folder carried by Kim Yo-jong, the sister of Kim Jong-un, who was in South Korea with the DPRK's Olympic delegation. All was revealed at a formal meeting with South Korean President Moon Jae-in on Saturday, which she attended along with other senior DPRK officials.
김여정 특사는
The Special Envoy Kim Yo-jong delivered a letter from Kim Jong-un, chairman of the State Affairs Commission, which contains his willingness to improve the inter-Korea relationship. Then she verbally delivered Chairman Kim Jong-un's invitation to Pyongyang at a convenient time, saying he is willing to meet President Moon Jae-in at the earliest date.
President Moon responded that the two sides should make it happen, though he told the delegation Pyongyang should also resume dialogue with Washington. U.S. Vice President Pence said the White House was willing to engage in talks with the DPRK without preconditions when he returned to the U.S. after a frosty visit to the Olympics in PyeongChang. He also said the U.S. would stick to a policy of maximum pressure and engagement at the same time. Meanwhile, the former UN Secretary General said he hoped talks in line with the Games could go further.
Thereby we can reduce tension on the Korean Peninsula, that we can move in toward the direction of further dialogue, achieving denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula, which will be critically important for eventual reunification.
Many are on the fence about the historic importance of Saturday's meeting and invitation. Most analysts doubt the feel-good mood at the Olympics will translate into more serious discussion about denuclearization on the Korean Peninsula.
So did Pyongyang's charm offensive at the Olympic Games work? Let's turn to our panel to find out. Particularly, what is even more important now is going to be the interactions among DPRK, South Korea, and the United States. Join me in the Beijing studio, Yang Xiyu, who is Senior Research Fellow at the China Institute of International Studies. Sir, welcome to our program. And in Washington, D.C., we have Douglas Paul, Vice President of the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. Mr. Paul, what a pleasure to have you back. And also in Boston, we are joined by Myung-Koo Kang, who is Assistant Professor from the Department of Political Science with City University of New York. Professor, welcome as well. Let me begin by asking you, Mr. Paul. So, when Vice President Pence, on his way back to the United States, talking about a talk is possible with DPRK, what exactly are you thinking?
Well, I'm eager to know more about what he meant. The characterization that was in the Washington Post has got me a little bit confused. I think it's possible to have talks, and it's possible to have talks that will go somewhere, but right now we don't seem to have an understanding between the U.S. and North Korea that the talks have to be about dismantling and destroying their nuclear and missile capabilities. If that's what it's about, and we can agree on that before the talks, I think the U.S. will be happy to join in based on what they've said in the past.
Professor,
but in the absence of that, I don't know where the talks go.
All right, Professor Kang, let me have your opinion also. The South Korean leader already received an invitation coming from the top leader of DPRK to visit the country at a convenient time.
Right.
So are we going to see some interesting picture? Well, the U.S. itself is confused about what it meant. South Korea and North Korea are getting ever closer when it comes to the discussion, at least.
Right. So the current situation is very important and interesting. I think that basically the South Korean government position is to maintaining, bilateral and multilateral relations. So in terms of maintaining strong alliance relations with the United States, engaging with, maximum pressure and engagement policy, especially, respecting this, maximum pressure effort. But at the same time, it seems to be quite clear the Korean government tried to improve inter-Korean relations and using this, dialogues and then more high-ranking exchange between the two governments as a kind of leverage in terms of solving the crisis situation in a peaceful way.
The warm reception of both Korean delegations at the PyeongChang Olympic Games give each other, apparently at least, mutual feeling, and so is to the international community. Before DPRK top legislator Kim Yong-nam flew back to Pyongyang, he told the South Korean President Moon, quote, "I return with the hope that we will meet again, having created a momentum and opportunity for frequent revisits and exchange views with the President," end of quote. So Moon replied, here it goes, quote, "Our meeting was precious. Let two Koreans cooperate to make this meeting embers become a torch," end of quote. Wow, a lot of big words over there, very warm. When you look at the interactions, at least verbally, Mr. Yang, how do you read these apparently mutual warm feelings?
Well, it's a very sophisticated situation facing both North and the South. On one hand, both Pyongyang and Seoul are very eager to bring about the summit. That will be the third between the North and the South.
Right.
That will benefit for both sides, although with different benefits. Both sides need. But on the other hand, there are indeed some preconditions to go to the summit. That is why President Moon said when he received the invitation, say, "I will try my best to create a condition to visit." So what does it mean by condition? In my understanding, basically two. Number one, the North and South dialogues now on the way need to touch on the nuclear issue. And the North should return to their commitment to the denuclearization. If North Korea return to the denuclearization, that will be easier for Moon to visit Pyongyang. Right. And then number two, now the temperature of South and the North is higher and higher, but you haven't seen the temperature change for the positive direction between Pyongyang and Washington. So basically, when Seoul and the Pyongyang's temperature is rising, Pyongyang and Washington should be rising either. So that is second condition. That is why President Moon said North Korea should also talk to the United States.
That seemed to what you just said coincide with what Mr. Paul earlier politely indicated as to what he wondered about exactly what the Vice President meant when he said they could talk, meaning the United States and the DPRK. So let me go back to Mr. Paul. Can U.S. always hold that precondition, that any talk will be with the precondition of commitment, at least from the North Koreans, that the denuclearization will be the focus of the discussion? By the way, let's not forget, the Secretary of State said we could even talk about weather.
Well, if the precondition is the North admits that its talks are about denuclearization, dismantlement and all that, then there's a really easy platform to start talking. If it's only a commitment to listen to the American or South Korean or Japanese side, on this subject, then the U.S. has to make a decision whether or not it's worth sitting down to talk, because you're really just going to talk around each other and not get to some subsequent point. I've long believed that the North is not ready to talk seriously because the sanctions that have been passed, which are quite significant in the past year, are not yet taking a bite out of the system in North Korea. And the North has not yet finished its testing of its advanced weapons systems to create a kind of credible enough threat to bring the U.S. to the table and maybe get the U.S. to change its position from immediate commitment to dismantlement to eventual commitment to dismantlement, but short-term management of the expansion of their nuclear and missile capabilities.
Okay.
This is tough decisions to make, and
let me just come in on the 2 points, Mr. Paul, you just mentioned. One is about the United States, what it meant. I think rather than asking what it meant, it's probably even better, Professor Kang, to analyze the differences and the division of opinions within the United States about whether to talk, on what conditions to talk about what, with the DPRK, if there is a talk. So, Professor Kang, what do you think, the messages you are reading, does it show much division within the United States? After all, the Secretary of Defense today also talked and saying DPRK, when they're already having the Army Day, they have the parade, it's not a good sign. So we see quite different expressions coming from top leaders of this administration. Professor Kang.
Right, that is so true. I mean, as you are fully aware of some kind of split or conflict going on here in the United States, different messages coming from even the White House and Donald Trump administration. So what is the real conditions and what kind of immediate goal of the Trump administration? For instance, whether Trump administration is quite seriously thinking about so-called nose bloody, attack or military option. But one thing is quite important thing is that, I mean, the Trump administration repeatedly highlighted that everything is on every option is on the table. It means that diplomacy or talk is also on the table.
That's right.
But to a certain degree, Vice President Pence's visit to South Korea this Olympic game and somewhat, some insensitive and sometimes, just avoiding the meeting or shaking hands with North Korean delegations and even, leaving the reception earlier, all these kind of things signal that genuine intention of the Trump administration is using military option or regime change, although it may be really violent and then sacrifice many South Korean people's, lives.
That is an interesting part, Professor Kang. If I could throw that point back to Mr. Paul. Mr. Paul, what is this? Is this a very clear division within the administration, or is this lack of strategy and real understanding about really what to do, or this is like a Chinese Tai Chi trying to be having a blurred, strategy apparently, so that the DPRK would getting confused and the others would do the same, so that the United States would get the biggest benefits out of the current situation. Mr. Paul, I have to rely on you to help us to understand.
Well, I think there are obviously tactical differences among the top personalities in the Trump administration about whether to emphasize threat or emphasize talks. And the combination of the two, they seem to believe, is creating that Tai Chi effect that you talk about, where keeping the North guessing is going to get them to the bargaining table on advantageous terms to the U.S. I'm not sure that's right. I think that the articulation of American policy toward North Korea is incomplete. We've talked about this and that, pressure here, sanctions there, missile tests, etc. But we don't really have a comprehensive policy to deal with North Korea, should it be unable or unwilling to come to agreement about ending, halting, somehow limiting its capabilities of development in the North. So we've got, and then I think it's even more important to talk about divisions in South Korea, where the government has been elected with a mandate to try to seek talks with North Korea. They have elections coming in June that are very important to strengthening their grip on domestic power, and yet they have this relationship with the U.S., which they must manage carefully, which has a much higher priority assigned not to talks, but to dismantlement of the nuclear capabilities.
Right.
And so what I'm concerned about is really how North Korea, through the Olympic initiative and maybe a subsequent summit meeting, will gain diplomatic opportunities to manipulate the relationship between South Korea and the United States.
All right, we see both from South Korea and the United States, they're not necessarily that eager to talk about the division within their own country. So, Mr. Yang, here in Beijing, would you like to come into the discussion? Exactly what is happening? How are you reading this ever-moving motion as we speak?
Well, firstly, I fully agree with my friend Doc's observation, say there's no comprehensive policy of the United States toward DPRK, because whenever they repeatedly say all options on the table, that really reflects their policy towards DPRK is actually in pieces. And secondly, there have been triangles since the Olympics on the peninsula. The two Koreas move very positive direction, and meanwhile, U.S. hesitate because of the policy, their policy in pieces. They don't know which option is the best for American national interests.
That's right.
So that is why I think there will be a larger and larger gap between Seoul and Washington, D.C. towards North Korea. But fundamentally, the nuclear issue will be the key player, will be the key factor affecting all of the three parties' game.
I do have a question to follow up on that, but before I do that, Mr. Yang, let me go back to Professor Kang from South Korea. So, Professor Kang, what do you think when you have the two Koreas getting ever closer? Will there be further division between South Korea and the United States, despite of the fact that the South Korean president said, talk to the Americans, North Koreans, please do that too, so that their conditions could be met. But I'm sure there's going to be something different already is happening between South Korea and the United States, claimed to be the closest allies.
Right. Right. I think the U.S. and South Korea relationship won't be seriously damaged. I mean, my point is that current Moon Jae-in government in South Korea is not naive or so much idealistic in terms of dealing with North Korea. So they are fully aware of that. North Korean regime is really shrewd and betrayed many trust in the past and past agreements. So my guess is that South Korean government will still emphasize maintaining close U.S.-South Korea alliance relationship. For instance, after the Olympic Games, I guess the South Korean government will agree to resume the military exercises. But at the same time, the South Korean government will deliver a signal to North Korea in terms of increasing the military exercises or deploying strategic weapons assets
Professor Kang,
instead of such kind of thing.
Wait a minute,
just a regular military
Kang,
exercise.
Wait a minute. Sometimes you just cannot please everybody, okay? No matter how hard you try. That's what's likely to be the role of Seoul. You just cannot please both sides. So Seoul has to make a choice. What's that choice going to be like?
No, but ultimately I think it's a balanced approach. For instance, South Korean government cannot satisfy everybody. For instance, in the South Korean domestic context, after the South Korean government reached an agreement with North Korea to organize a single women's ice hockey team, and then a Korean Peninsula flag kind of thing, it was backfired. So the supporting rate of President Moon plummeted about 10%. So there's a kind of internal domestic split or hesitance about rapid reconciliation between the two Koreas. So the Moon Jae-in government is fully aware of such kind of domestic split, and then also if the speed of reconciliation with North Korea is too fast, if that's the case, it can estrange South Korea and then U.S. alliance relationship. In this context, I think the Korean government position is basically maintaining a balanced approach, respecting Chinese government opinion, and the United States, Japan, and Russia all together I think that's the only way, maintaining some balanced approach.
As you may know, Vice President Pence, when he was reluctant to stand up for the unified team at the opening ceremony, he also got a lot of criticism back at home, saying he's not supporting his allies at all because there are South Korean athletes in that unified team, so-called the Korean Peninsula. Let me go to you, Mr. Yang. I promised you earlier. One of the things you mentioned extremely important. We haven't talked about North Korea. We are having incapability of figuring out how politics works in that country. However, we do have some knowledge about how the nuclear tests and their technology capabilities would work. So, Mr. Yang, does their nuclear possibilities and their testing possibilities give them much space to maneuver among all players this year?
Well, I think what you have said really is strong leverage for North Korea on every party. We concerned, you concerned, every party concerned. But on the other hand, whenever we blame North Korea, say nuclear issue is the key, if North Korea return to the demilitarization, every talks can return. But when we hold that scenario, we should pay same attention to this question, say, how to let North Korea to give up nuclear weapon in confidence. I asked a question to an American official. I said, well, if North Korea give up nuclear weapon, are you sure North Korea regime will be safe or secure? He quickly said, no, no one can guarantee that. So if that is the situation, how Kim Jong-un will and dare to give up nuclear weapon?
All right. I think that is a fundamental question we have not got the chance to talk about, but we mentioned that many times in our earlier discussions. So we hope that question will have some answer in the near future. For now, I want to thank the three of you, gentlemen, for helping us to understand all the the latest discussions and developments. Yang Xiyu, Douglas Paul, and Myung-Koo Kang. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for being with us. Thank you. Stay with us here on World Insight with me, Tian Wei. Still to come on our program. Some of his popular books are Beijing, Beijing, and I Like It. What is the mass appeal of author Feng Tang, and why can't China's city slickers can't get enough of his work? The interview right after this break. Welcome back. You're watching World Insight with me, Tian Wei, coming to you Monday to Friday on CGTN. If you look at his biography, author Feng Tang really is China's jack of all trades. Born in Beijing in the 1970s, he graduated with a major in gynecology and also later a short time working in the medical profession, he switched to the business world after getting an MBA in the U.S. Years later, he took on another cooperative challenge, managing a branch of one of China's most well-known state-owned enterprises. Throughout his career, writing has been his true passion. In his free time, he churned out a whole series of novels, something like Give Me a Girl When I Am 18, that's one of them. Beijing, Beijing, another. I Like It, that's another. That's in addition to some of the provocative works which even today haven't been published in simplified Chinese on the Chinese mainland. His name is, some say, instantly recognizable to many Chinese urbanites, from teens to adults. Everyone almost has found something to love in his work, a crazy and dramatic reflection of their own lives in an ever-changing China. Describe yourself as audacious. What does this mean to be audacious as a writer in China?
To me, being audacious, number one, I just write as free as I want in terms of content and also in terms of selection of word, selection of forms, both content and format. Number two, I tend to not to follow any social taboo in my writing. Pay no attention to the limitations of social norms. Number three, I pay no attention to the market response. I pay very little attention to the sales number. So net, I just write as freely as possible, regardless of anything.
Is it really possible to do that?
I think that's the rules I try to follow. Of course, if you aim at getting 10, sometimes you'll get 8 or 9. However, if you only aim at 6, you won't pass the average.
So how would you now describe yourself? 6, 8?
I'm aiming at 10. I'm working on reaching 10, but I'm not in a position to judge my achievement so far, and I hope I can achieve higher and better.
Though Feng Tang is modest about his achievements, he was certainly keen to show me one of the places he loves and lives. A corner of a traditional courtyard in downtown Beijing, which he says was a private temple for one of the most powerful women in Chinese history, the Empress Cixi Daowager. He told me of all the legends surrounding the place, while I nursed my teacup and admired his collection of antiques. Feng Tang told me that he really loves the contrasts between the ancient and the contemporary. It's such a gift to him as a writer. China is such an interesting place these days. Maybe the most intense place in the world.
Yeah.
What does that mean to you as a writer?
I think I'm born in the right time. I read People's Daily and I watch CCTV.
Full of goodies, isn't it, for writers?
Full of interesting stuff, very interesting stuff. Sometimes even I use my imagination. I cannot think things could be this way.
Can you help me to understand how those stories, maybe on the paper, on TV, or through stories told by the others,
yes,
would eventually reflect it in some of your works? Does it really go that way?
Yes,
okay.
Yes. For example, just give you one story just happened during this lunch. I had lunch with my parents. My father was away. My mom was saying to me that, hey, did you watch TV last night? I told her many times, I don't have a TV at all. Did you watch TV last night? Saying in Jiangsu province, there are a huge number of ducks were dead, not naturally, just with certain disease or poison. Then just at this time, my father came in, say, with a duck. Saying it's extremely cheap. I don't know what's going on, but I like the price. I just bought one. So this, that thing cannot happen.
Just little things, but coincidences,
yes,
the drama
yes,
has always
yes,
been there
yes,
in
yes,
life.
Yes.
Too many to choose from?
Yes.
How would you streamline them as a writer?
The ones came into my mind first.
Usually what kind?
Usually with strong contrast, or usually something with a strange sense of humor, just as the one I just described to you. You can imagine...
Satirical a little bit.
Yes. You can imagine what in my mom's heart when he saw my father came in with a stupid duck. I always do.
What did you do with that duck?
I didn't eat any.
That's interesting. Talk about language.
Yes.
In your books, you use some very interesting combination of Chinese language with a modern kick, while at the same time combining some of the minor elements of the elegance of the ancient Chinese languages.
Yes.
It probably has a lot to do with your upbringing and your reading history. But what is the language to you as a writer, as a Chinese writer, contemporary?
Yeah. Here, I could be too firm, but I strongly believe Chinese language is the most beautiful thing, not one of, it's the most beautiful thing man ever made, human being ever made. is full of depth, full of flexibility, and full of the possibility. So it's sometimes what I mean by full of possibility is you always feel the limitation of one language, even in Chinese. But on the other hand, if you know Chinese as a language better, you will find out it can create things that larger than your imagination, richer than your original thinking.
Do you play with that a lot?
Yes, yes. For example, the name of the towns and the cities. Give you one example in Shandong, they call it Xixia, is live with all the rainbows, living with the colorful cloud. So there's many things in the Chinese language that are extremely beautiful, extremely warm, sometimes can be extremely deep.
Are we as creative as we were before?
No.
Or actually we have so much left behind our ancestors?
No, I think we, as a whole, we haven't really digested what our ancestors left us.
What does it take to digest?
Reading, reciting, read more books. My thinking maybe still very traditional. I still think it's like Kunlun Mountains. You need to go to the top of Kunlun Mountain and grow your own plant on the top of Kunlun Mountain. There's a consequence. There's a sequence of that. You go to the top, then you grow your own things.
Right.
So you learn before you can really create. But on the other hand, I agree. Some extremely young artists, some extremely young businessmen, they can create something extremely beautiful. So that's, I think we can combine these two together.
Feng Tang enjoys talking about China's history and his own personal history, particularly some of the most dramatic episodes. He belongs to the generation born in the 1970s, right in the midst of China's Cultural Revolution. But he's lived through a period of huge change in China as the economy blossomed and the country opened up to the outside world. From rags to riches overnight. It could be intense and very confusing. What is the personality, if there is any, of this generation? And in your writing, how is it reflecting it? Or not at all, you want to be as far away from this generation as possible?
I think the 70s, born in the 70s people, in general, are more commercial driven, which means in more accurate way is more market driven. When we grow up, there was no market driven economy, it's more planned economy. Then suddenly we had all the opportunities to go for market. Then it's totally new to our previous generation, to our fathers, mothers, parents. They always believe that there's only one way to go, which is study hard, join good company, or do and start up your own company, earn more money. So the whole country is more market driven. Maybe for the first time in the whole history. So we are the generation for the money. Money in a good way, not in a bad way.
What do you mean in a good way?
In a good way is getting rich in a legal bonding way, not just money is everything. Just we are so poor at that time as a society, as a generation, we need to get rich, we need to get a decent life. So that's very overarching for a long time. So under this condition, my generation is quite shy from having real hobbies. However, it's humanity. Real hobby can never be forgotten as your real love.
Real hobby, what? What kind of real hobbies?
For example, writing.
So there's certain things that is more important than just being rich and being financially safe.
That's right. That's right.
But on the other hand, how would you compare your generation's writer, for example, you and your friends, with the other generation, the 60s, the 50s, and then, of course, the 80s and 90s, which are very self-expressive these days in the Chinese society?
I think my generation writers is quite unique in a way that I just described. At the very early part of their life, they go for financial safety. They go for good jobs, good income, houses, taking care of the children and parents. So the smartest people of my generation, they are not writers when they are very young. However, the good part of that is they have real-world experience.
Right.
So they know how it feels to lead an army of 10,000 people, right? I mean, in a commercial organization.
Right.
They know the world. Normally, they study abroad. Normally, they get degrees both in China and also in U.S. or U.K. Sometimes they study literature outside China. So they're, in terms of knowledge base, they're very solid. They don't have the burden of Cultural Revolution. Also, they do not have the limitation of only studying in Chinese. So they are better writer in terms of experience and knowledge.
Are you going to say this to the 80s and 90s generation directly?
Yes, yes.
What do you think about them?
They have more freedom than we do. Newer generation, they do have the freedom to choose different way of life, different way of career. However, their potential risk compared to my generation is their time is too fragmented. They have too many attractions. Even looking at this stupid screen, they have a smartphone. At that time, they don't even have a computer.
Right.
So my impression is my generation tend to read books more, tend to be more stable in one career. For example, at least work for 3 to 5 years, do not change jobs that often. If we open a book, we finish the book. If we write write chapter 1, we finish writing the whole book.
There's a sense of superiority in your language, I think, that I just heard.
Yes,
why is that?
Because I think writing and reading, they're bonded together. And you need to substantial accumulation of reading and writing to become a master of it. To me, there's no bypass, no shortcut. Insights.
Only the real stuff.
Yes. If we don't have insight, I just stop writing.
Have you realized that in some of your answers, there's a sense of reminiscence already? Is it because of age, or is it because you think it's really the most important part of your life?
Because I'm already 44.
So what? According to the United Nations standard, you are still the young generation.
I like to compare things. For example, my feelings, my impressions, my understandings when I was very young, and my understanding, the same set of things I'm having now.
Were those days the most beautiful days of your life?
No, I don't think so. I think every single stage of life is unique. What I'm doing is, I read Chinese history extensively. I like to compare. It's more like in this large-scale time dimension, you find the essence of humanity. So it's, as a thinker, as a writer, you always try to compare, try to think about what's the difference, what's the commonality among things, among people, among different dynasties. So that's what I generally do.
We talk a lot about your past works, your aspirations. What's next, if that is a question that I could ask? What are the things you are extremely interested in now that you think might be interesting for us to know as well?
Yeah, majority of my literature heroes are already died around my age, like Jack Kerouac, like D.H. Lawrence.
Shall I say congratulations to you
Yes,
that you are
yes,
still alive?
yes. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Kicking and.
Yeah. Then I guess I will have less expectation of life. I just want to let life take its own courses. I will still keep on reading, keep on writing, keep on understanding this whole world, keep on getting insights and get them out in writing.
It's a great pleasure to have you, Feng Tang, on World Insight. I'm sure you're providing many of the insights that our viewers are interested in. Thank you so much. All the best.
Same thing here.
Thank you very much. Our exclusive interview is Feng Tang, contemporary Chinese writer. That is all the time we have for today. If you'd like to see more, try to find us, World Insight CGTN, into your search engine or check out our YouTube channel. You can also follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Weibo. From me, Tian Wei, and everyone on the World Insight team, thanks for watching, and tune in again next time for insights across China and around the world. Good night.